Did Israel kill Charlie Kirk? That's the topic of today's provocative show, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. My name is Stephen Cox here at Cox News. I want to get right into this topic because we haven't done a show on Charlie Kirk just yet, and I wanted to wait for the dust to settle a little bit to comment on it. And as you who have been following this know, it's chaotic, it's confusing, it's at this point sort of being moved on. And the only ones who are really tackling or continuing to look into this are people like Candace Owens and others on Twitter. And at this point, it's become so confusing. There's so many different theories out there, some of which I think are being intentionally planted on social media to make it even more confusing. On top of the fact that we know that there's AI and video alteration that can happen, there's so many theories being put forth that it's supposed to be confusing. It's supposed to make you give up. It's supposed to have us think that, okay, the official narrative is the official narrative, and that anyone who continues to look into this is a conspiracy theorist. So Candace is the only one who I think is actually trying to pursue this because, again, Charlie was her friend for so many years. She's not going to give it up. Now, unfortunately, she's probably making a few mistakes along the way. I haven't watched everything, so I might be speaking out of turn there, but she's trying. And I think there's a lot of effort, rather kudos to her and others who are not letting this go. And I'm not sure we're ever going to get to the bottom of it, but I wanted to do the show to share my thoughts on this because a lot of people are asking me, what do you think? What do you theorize as to what actually happened? I first want to bring up a tweet that I sent out the day of the shooting. And here's what I said. The assassination of Charlie Kirk is the equivalent of 9/11 for the Zoomer generation. Keep a close eye on who is blamed, how it's used to shift support for certain policies, and its effect on political discourse. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, first of all, the Gen Z male voting bloc is very much anti-Zionist. They're not in favor of Israel. And if you think back to what happened with 9/11, what did we do? We literally, that was a very traumatic national event where the entire country was galvanized, thanks especially to George Bush, to go to war and to root out the bad guys to whoever did this, right? And eventually it led to us going into Iraq, Afghanistan, going after bin Laden, and other places that were definitely antagonistic to Israel's hegemony in the Middle East, okay? So that's what I mean by that, is that the young generation never had a traumatic national event like 9/11. And again, we're seeing the fallout now. It seems apparent to me that Kirk is being hailed as a martyr for Zionism, as a martyr for political conservatism against the left and the right, right? So this is what's happening, and I want to bring my next tweet up again because I think it's important to not forget again how this is being used. And again, the point is, Kirk was speaking out, starting to speak out against not only Epstein, who he said actually was a Israeli agent. He was often a critic of the Anti-Defamation League. Again, everybody on the political right is, but the Anti-Defamation League is pro-Zionist. It was born from the Zionist state of Israel. And Kirk was also starting to say, okay, look, I'm going to ask some difficult questions. I want to know, was there a stand-down order given by Netanyahu on October 7th to allow that massacre to happen, which was then used to, again, launch this entire attack against Gaza and the civilians there. So, again, who's filling the void that Kirk leaves behind? Again, I ask, who pay close attention to those, to what that person will say about foreign policy in the Middle East. So you have to understand something. Let's back up a second, like for the macro view on things. There's a problem for Israeli support among the next generation of Americans, especially Zoomers and men under 35, whose polling will all show that they do not support Israel. And the young political left does not either. So Palestinian activists on college campuses. Okay, so you have a sort of problem for Israel for the next 30 years. Okay, and as far as I can tell, the situation on the political right is as currently follows: is that you have three major voices those under 35, especially men, look to. You have Ben Shapiro, who seems to be very close, and he is close to Benjamin Netanyahu. Some say he's a Mossad agent himself. He's said very many things that will suggest that he is a very much loyal to Israel, and he's working closely with them. Again, we'll see if anything more concretely bears out. But he's there with the Daily Wire, again, running interference for the Zionist cause, and with Michael Knowles and Matt Walsh courting that under 35 Christian vote, okay, and to make everybody who's part of that movement supportive of Israel. Shapiro has said many times, if you don't support Israel, if you don't support Zionism, you're anti-Semitic, right? Second, you have Kirk, who, again, grew Turning Point USA with tons of money from big Jewish Zionist donors. Now, Kirk, again, in the last 2 years, has been waffling, straying from the plantation from the Zionist talking points. Reportedly, he did not go to Israel in the last 2 months of his life, although he had been requested to by Benjamin Netanyahu. There's rumors he turned down a major $150 million donation. I don't know. I haven't been able to corroborate that. But again, if you're Israel and there's a major problem of under 35 men as well as liberals, then Kirk is going to be a problem for the next 30 years, okay? If he's starting to question these things, and if it's, as there's some truth to this, that he was starting to look into the Catholic religion, okay? Thirdly, there's Nick Fuentes, who has the following of the Groypers. This is a populist, anti-open borders, very Catholic-oriented group of young men under 25 who are very much opposed to Kirk as well as Shapiro's messaging, right? To keep the conservative movement on the Zionist plantation, okay? So you have those three. That's the backdrop. So the benefit is if you take Kirk out, then who's going to step in? Who's going to look to and try to court those under 35 voters? You have them avoid. And what's happened in the last several days is that Ben Shapiro went on the Charlie Kirk show with Matt Walsh and Knowles and literally announced, I'm giving $1 million to Turning Point USA. So if they see an opening there that, and they're able to ostracize Fuentes for this foreseeable future, then they can scoop up those supporters of Kirk who are otherwise starting to also with him question the Zionist narrative. So that's the backdrop of all this. Okay. So we need to keep that in mind. I'll touch on that later in the show, but I first want to just mention a few things about the story itself, which do not make sense to me at all. Firstly, there are cameras on college campuses, especially it seems this one, all over the place, given the response to the Me Too movement, wanting to protect women on college campuses, as well as just mass shootings in general on schools, high schools, colleges, grade schools. There's cameras all over. The fact that all we have gotten from the FBI is that a grainy camera footage of this guy jumping off this building, which seems to be about 15, 20 feet almost. How he ever got up there, okay, we don't know. That's suspicious, okay? We don't have evidence of him at all on this building, allegedly, other than just jumping down from a very tall height. And there's also footage, if you look at one of these, a person who's walking like behind a tree, they just disappear out of the blue in one frame to the next. That's kind of odd. Second, he doesn't have a gun with him while he's running, at least in this popular footage that's out there. And also the shadow that he has disappears when he runs on part of the other aspect of the other area of this roof. So I don't believe that's actually like the footage. Again, we know AI, we know technological abilities that the government has that are way more advanced than us. This could all just be fake video evidence. We need to be open to that. Because again, what's the next narrative that's being pushed is that this shooter allegedly changed clothes multiple times before he was on the roof, while he was on the roof, and then after the roof, right? This is what the governor of Utah said to the public. He changed clothes multiple times. Then there's the random gun, this gun that was planted in the woods that I've asked multiple people who are who are sportsmen who say the scope was too far back. It would have been very difficult to pull the shot off from that distance with where that scope was. Then there's the convenient claim that there are engravings on the bullets with anti-LGBT slogans. And that, again, the shooter assembled the gun, disassembled the gun while he was on the roof after he got shot, after he shot Charlie Kirk, put it in a backpack of sorts, which again, the video footage of him on the roof doesn't suggest he actually has anything with him. And then he reassembled the gun in the woods to leave it conveniently to be picked up. Again, if he had a backpack with him, it wouldn't have even fit in the backpack itself. Okay. Then, moreover, there's no footprints that were going off. Like, again, it seems that he was wearing these Chuck Taylor Converse shoes, those old ones that like they used to wear back in the day. Okay, why hasn't there been any evidence the FBI's put forth about, yes, here's what we saw on the roof itself. Here's the exact match. Doesn't seem to make much sense to me. What else is there? The text messages. Okay, if you've read these text messages, I want to bring some of them just up on the screen real quick. These do not sound like a Zoomer. These do not read at all. And here's Todd Starnes, who was with Fox News Radio for many years. He actually interviewed me a couple years ago. He's now with, I think, Newsmax. Here's the convenient text messages that just fill in all the blanks that we did not have. Again, no timestamps, nothing like that, because again, that would have been pretty difficult to line up. You weren't the one who did it. I am. I'm sorry. I thought they caught the person. Why did you do it? Why did I do it? Yeah, I had enough of his hatred. Some hatred can't be negotiated out. All right. So how long have you been planning this? Over a week. Like, this just conveniently fills in all of the areas that law enforcement apparently just needed to fill in, right? It just makes the situation, the narrative, all the more perfect, right? So this is like, again, the passport after 9/11. If you think back to that, the passport of the terrorists that they allegedly found in the tons of rubble, burning rubble after 9/11. That's, in my view, that's what the gun is in the woods. It's just too convenient. The other comparison, I think, to 9/11, again, is after the shooting, the governor says, we got him. Like, he's trying to literally replay the Osama bin Laden line. Like, so again, there's a solitary shooter who conveniently happens to leave his gun behind. The text messages just fill in all the voids. It doesn't make sense to me. Let's move on to the shooting itself. Again, we pray for Charlie's repose of his soul. It's an awful situation. But after the shooting itself, this guy stands up. Again, George Zinn is his name. He's the man who everybody thought was initially the shooter himself. And Jason, this ex-user here, I'm going to bring up on the screen, asks all the right questions about who is this guy? Why was he at the event in the first place? Right? Typically, older guys, assuming this guy was not a college student, probably wasn't living in the dorms. Why was he there in the first place? Second, why did his pants fall down? Why did he drag his feet? Why was he uncooperating? Why did he actually say, shoot me after this? Okay. What's going to happen to him? Is the media going to follow up on this? Are we going to hear anything more about this guy? You're going to hear a couple stories that were released, and I saw them too, after the shooting that said he was sort of a crazed lunatic, local gadfly. But again, this guy's very curious to me. My suspicion is if this guy did get shot after the shooting itself, after the assassination itself, this story would be over. It was just like how Jack Ruby took out Lee Harvey Oswald. And then that's the end of it. And I think that was the goal with this Zinn guy, who, again, we'll probably never hear from much about him again. Maybe he'll go to prison. We don't know. But we need to have him on TV and say, hey, who do you know? Why did you do this? What were you trying to do? In my view, his whole role in this, was to divert the attention of the police so the actual shooter could get away. Simple as that. Okay, so sort of first red flag. Second, why was all the footage taken down by Turning Point USA staff after the shooting? You see now Candace Owens bringing attention to this. There were men who were either part of Charlie's security team or part of Turning Point USA who literally got up on the bloodstained chair that Kirk was sitting in, or perhaps one of the other chairs there. And they literally took the cameras down. They took the SD cards out. Now, again, maybe that was their way of securing the area, because apparently there wasn't a lot of police and law enforcement on hand. Maybe they did not want anyone else to take it. Very plausible. But what happened to that footage? Why hasn't that been allowed to get out? Candace Owens says she's seen it, and that it doesn't necessarily say or show what the media is telling you about the gunshot wound. And again, I do not believe, or I think it's rather very curious. Now we're seeing reports of a shooting from the side, that that what we saw emerge from Charlie's neck area was the exit wound. I'm open to that. I think there has been some acoustic evidence that some have put forth. Again, I haven't vetted it. That suggests the shooting, that the gunshot and then the hit on Charlie happened at a much smaller distance, that the time frame for a 200-yard shot, which is what the shooter allegedly on the roof would have done, that actually the acoustics suggest it was much closer. Now we're also getting footage from others from the opposite side of Charlie, and there's like a flash in the building window that suggests the shooting could have come from the upper right corner and gone through that and come out this way. Again, we don't know, but what are we being told by the media and by Andrew's friend Andrew Colvett, Charlie's friend Andrew Colvett, who's worked with Turning Point USA. He apparently said that Charlie had, or the coroner was told that the bullet was stopped by Charlie's bones. And apparently this was a 30-06 shot, this bullet, massive bullet, that it just lodged in him from 200 feet or 200 yards. That doesn't make any sense to me. There clearly would have been an exit wound going out the back. Where's the bullet? Why hasn't it been retrieved? There's no way this bullet just lodged in Charlie Kirk's body. Okay, that doesn't make any sense to me. I think, again, we are now at a phase in this where there's so many theories. And I've heard and I've talked to people who have theorized that a guy in the front of the audience sort of pulled up his shoulder and shot Charlie with a sort of handgun like 10 feet away. I don't think that's the case. Again, I think we're at a point where there's so many rabbit holes being pushed out there, maybe even intentionally. And again, I can't trust all this footage that we're seeing, that it's intentional now to the point where, again, it's a flooding of the zone with disinformation to confuse us, to get us to throw our hands up in the air and say, I don't know what's happened. I'm done with it. I'm sick of it. We're never going to get the truth. And that's why when Candace is still pushing this and others who still want to get to the bottom of this, they're just being called conspiracy theorists. They're just being called, anti-Jewish Zionists, etc., or anti-Zionists, conspiracy theorists, anti-Semites, etc., for even trying to get to the bottom of this. So it's very unfortunate. This is where we're at. Now, a word does need to be said about Charlie's Catholicism or his purported looks into the faith. Now, firstly, let me say I've asked around and tried to confirm this. There's no proof he had his marriage validated by the church. Charlie did live in Arizona, and he was, it is a fact, attending a church out there, St. Bernadette's in Arizona. I think it was in Phoenix, somewhere area. Maybe Scottsdale. Don't quote me on that. That he was going, and they was taking somewhat of an interest in the Catholic religion. And it's also confirmed that he was wearing a St. Michael chain on his neck when he was shot. That is something that his wife held up when you saw her drive ride away. It wasn't a rosary, it was a St. Michael pendant. So that's good. Charlie was wearing St. Michael on him. Moreover, we do know that Charlie was saying in the last just literally months of his life that Mary, the Blessed Mother, is the antidote to toxic feminism. Okay. And that's a very positive thing that he, as an evangelical, was coming to even say that. That's a very positive thing. Moreover, we also know he was going to go on Bishop Barron's podcast like this week, and he didn't, obviously because he's passed. But he was open to appearing on and talking with leaders in the Conciliar Novus Church. So kudos to him. What's also true is that he was saying things very critical of Leo himself, as well as, Francis primarily. And Chris Jackson has done a good job here of running down everything on his blog, Substack. Charlie Kirk saw through Francis and Leo. He would often tweet over the last several years. And again, this is why it's so important for us as Catholics to hold those in authority responsible and to call out their errors and to not be hypocritical to Protestants who are seeing through this, who are entertaining the idea of becoming a Catholic, and yet they see the conciliar popes, they see the heresies, they see what's going on, they see how they're politically liberal, etc., and they're not converting. They want to see us trads defend the honor of God, defend the truth. They don't want us to go quiet and just play ball in exchange for Latin Mass. Non-Catholics, especially those who are interested, who it seems even maybe Tucker Carlson might be interested they want to see Catholics who are part of the resistance, part of the counter-revolution. So anyway, here's some Kirk tweets from the past. The Pope could even save Argentina's finances. Glenn Beck, who was a former Catholic, the Pope could have ended abortion in America. He didn't. The Pope missed an opportunity. So he's seeing all of this. And here's something I want to play for you all. When Kirk was speaking with Michael Knowles just recently, and it's probably the most damning indictment of the conciliar situation.
Why should I care at all what that guy from Argentina has to say?
Well, because you care what your pastor has to say.
Yes, but if my pastor starts saying crazy things, I find a new pastor. So if your Pope starts saying crazy things, maybe he's not the Pope.
Maybe he's not the Pope. It's a good point. And look, he also says, Kirk, after Leo's election, he says, I pray if the new Pope defends the faith, defends the West, defends biology and eternal truth, I will be his biggest fan. He also called out Prevost for, is he an open borders globalist installed to counter Trump, or is he a Chicago Republican pro-life warrior? And of course, we all know in the last recent interviews that Leo gave to Crux, he's still very much concerned with what's going on in the United States and its immigration policies. So obviously, Kirk was a Protestant, very much so. And he would often say, it's all about Jesus, it's all about Jesus. Of course, we know that. But Jesus sends in his place priests. He sends the church saints over time to act as intermediaries. And yes, the Blessed Virgin Mary is a intercessor for us. So Kirk was perhaps starting to see that. We don't know. So obviously, he had some theological questions that needed to be resolved. But that's where we as Catholics, lay Catholics especially, and apologists, where Michael Knowles should have come in and had some good responses to this. And I think he did in that interview. So I'm not being super critical of Michael in that particular instance. He did say some good things about defending the priesthood and the church itself, as opposed to just focusing on Jesus alone. But we need to be good Catholics and to good traditional Catholics and remind those who are searching for the truth to say, here is the truth in traditional Catholicism. Now, just a few words quickly on the funeral itself. Clearly, this is we are in a Protestant country. This is an evangelical country. This was an evangelical service, right? It was very bizarre. There was a lot of, song and praise and worship music and contemporary music and, a lot of fireworks, a lot of pyrotechnics. Very bizarre. And clearly, Trump's speech was pretty bad. He went rambling on about certain things, very, just not fitting for a memorial. He was talking about the autism news that was coming out the next day. He said, I actually still hate my enemies, which was very bad on Trump, and he should be realizing that now. But, go figure. Whereas Erica, I think Kirk gave the strongest speech. Again, she forgave the shooter, the alleged shooter. She gave some very strong testimony about her husband and how the nuclear family needs to be the priority. And she spoke beautifully about the role of women in the family and the role of husbands in the family, stronger than I think many bishops in this country ever could. And again, for all Charlie's Protestant views, he did mention the name of our Lord on college campuses. And the more clips I'm watching of him, the more it really was he was a sort of a missionary of sorts to those secularists and those feminists and those liberals who are on college campuses, who, again, probably had never really viewed the Christianity, broadly speaking, as something that could be rationally defended. Again, Kirk was bringing up our Lord's name. Again, not a Catholic, but perhaps there's at least some seeds there being planted in these radical revolutionaries, these Antifa-type people, who really just looked at, social conservatism, marriage itself, abortion, and did not ever think it could be defended in a rational way. So, there's that. And then I think Tucker Carlson's views, or his speech at the rally itself, and I think it is more of a rally than a memorial. And that's just to say the state of the situation today. It's the politics we live in. We do not live in a Catholic country, bare bones, evangelical even. And Tucker said, this is what happened to our Lord 2,000 years ago. The guys sitting around eating hummus, it's a very clever turn of phrase to, I think, impute the enemies of Christ, were sitting around and saying, how can we shut this guy up? So, oh, we'll kill him. And they did the same thing to Charlie. And I think I will say there should be praise to Tucker and Megyn Kelly for speaking out on this and saying, hey, look, they said they were deeply bothered by the fact that Benjamin Netanyahu jumped on American airwaves and tried to claim Charlie as a martyr for Israel after the last 2 days the days after his assassination. I think that's right. I think they deserve praise for that. So kudos to them. But let's get to the heart of this now. The question we all want to ask: who killed him? Was Israel involved? Obviously, Netanyahu has denied this. He was asked by Greta Van Susteren on Newsmax, did Israel have anything to do with this? And Netanyahu surprisingly sort of struggled through his words. It was very telling, I think, to me about where his heart is maybe in all this. Because again, if you ask somebody point blank, it's a very difficult question. And if you did something, or if you're guilty, it is something that's difficult to kind of evade. In any case, my own view, again, why the strong insistence that they did not kill Charlie? Again, Netanyahu released at least 2 statements, I think, in the days after the shooting, saying we had nothing to do with this. Ben Shapiro was asked also on a podcast, what do you think of claims that Israel was behind this? He just said, oh, they're ludicrous. It's despicable. There was also an Israeli official who was asked this too. Was Mossad involved? So, the tell to me is they're trying to capitalize on the situation itself. Netanyahu again jumps on American airwaves, tells everybody this is a result of the leftists and the Marxists and the Muslims trying to destroy American culture. So the framing mechanism, trying to blame this on them right away and to draw attention away from oneself, is very curious. I think that's quite odd. And the insistence, the protesting repeatedly of Zionists and American Jews that Mossad had nothing to do with this. It's also very curious why the protesting so severely. Again, no one else is really rising to that level. And then also, why has so many members of the Israeli Knesset and political establishment, I mean, there was a mural painted to Charlie less than, I think, like 3 days after his assassination. And they've been trying again to make him a martyr for Israel, a martyr for the Zionist cause. Again, that goes back to what I said at the beginning of the show, that with Kirk now gone, who's stepping into this void? If you want to capture or convince and cater to those young Zionists, or those young men who are not Zionists, again, the under 25 crowd in the U.S., the under 30 crowd are not Zionists. What you do is you make their hero a martyr for your cause, a martyr for Israel, a martyr for the Jewish state. So that's a possibility here. And Kirk, again, was saying very many things that were not kosher, okay? He was going on major podcasts and questioning the official narrative, which I think could potentially give those in Israel a major red flag about what direction he was going in, maybe over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And here I want to play one of those clips for that. This is Charlie on the Patrick Bet-David show. He's a big influencer.
Fact is now Bibi and the Israeli hard right government has a mandate. I gotta be careful the way I say this. They're gonna try to ethnically cleanse Gaza. I mean I don't use that term lightly. Okay.
All right. So that's the first big thing where Kirk went the opposite of the Zionist Evangelical Alliance, right? Because in the days after Kirk was shot, who went over there were Marco Rubio. Speaker Mike Johnson just went with Sarah Huckabee Sanders several months ago. And those are optics. Those are PR campaigns. Mike Huckabee also went and said the source of all morality is the Jewish people. I mean, the guy, have you ever heard of Jesus Christ in the church? I mean, come on, Ambassador Huckabee. So Kirk was saying, I don't necessarily buy this narrative. Again, he was also saying very many other things. Here he is on his podcast, which you can imagine would infuriate the big Jewish Zionist donors who helped build up Turning Point USA. All right, so here is him on that topic.
And Jewish donors, they have a lot of explaining to do, a lot of decoupling to do, because Jewish donors have been the number one funding mechanism of radical, open border, neoliberal, quasi-Marxist policies, cultural institutions, and nonprofits. This is a beast created by secular Jews. And now it's coming for Jews, and they're like, what on earth happened?
So you can imagine how that might go over. And yeah, for sure. And here's somebody from Israel. Here's a headline, actually, from a Jewish media outlet, the Times of Israel, literally the day after he was murdered. Kirk's murder can't erase his anti-Semitism. All right. And here's what a Jewish rabbi had to also say about Kirk in his last days.
He annoyed people in the Jewish community over the last few months with some of the criticisms he had for Israel. And I argued, I don't know if you saw the piece I wrote in the Jerusalem Post a couple of months ago when he was being attacked after Tucker Carlson spoke at SAS, and people were calling him an anti-Semite. And I know Charlie, and here he's, little do they know, half the time he's on college campuses, all he's doing is hasbara and defending Israel. And he doesn't even want to be. He doesn't even know the issues that well, but he's forced to. But he dutifully, with a smile on his face, defends Israel left and right. We all saw what he did, in England.
All right. So there is, it seems, an incentive for Kirk's voice to be taken out. Again, all theory, right? We don't know the ins and outs of all this. There are levels of discussion, obviously, that were had behind the scenes, clearly, about all of this. And it's still going on amongst people. What do we do? How do we respond to this? Tucker Carlson is one who's saying, it's just odd that all these forces seem to have joined the chorus of making Kirk a martyr for Israel. Again, we don't know. We don't know. Circumstantial evidence gives strong indications that it's a possibility. Now, of course, it is a possibility, it seems, that this shooter acted alone, that he was very disturbed, that he was very much involved in, apparently he has a transgender boyfriend who he was living with. We don't know, again, all the details on that, but I just don't trust the FBI at all. Kash Patel seems quite incompetent on this. And, what's also curious about this is my last point. And thanks for tuning in. Stay with us, everybody, at Cox News. Go to our Substack. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Rumble. Again, my point earlier was Kirk was like the middle ground between Ben Shapiro, who's the ultra-Zionist neocon, likely Mossad agent, right? And then you have on the hard right, young Nick Fuentes, Catholic, who very much is anti-immigrant, anti-Zionist, etc., right? And what's curious to me now, again, as I said before, who's stepping into Kirk's role? Who's getting more exposure? Who's going to be the one courting and grooming that under 35 generation towards which view? The Zionists, the anti-Zionists, immigration? Are they going to be anti-borders, etc.? Well, again, this past week, what we had was Ben Shapiro go on with the Daily Wire crew and host the Charlie Kirk show. Okay, so that's one indication that they want to step in and get that youth vote and bring them to their cause. At the same time, Nick Fuentes was literally just profiled by the New York Times. Okay, he received a massive bio, and again, I'll bring this up here on the screen, therefore elevating his profile to a massive new level. Again, Nick is out of Chicago, where I used to be. And again, I hear many good things about, I'm not saying anything about what his background is. Some say he's an agent. We don't know these things at all. I know Dave Riley's been on this show before saying no way that the agents, FBI agents, are actually Tucker and others. But this elevates Nick's profile, right? And Nick has also been very outspoken against anyone who says Israel could be the one responsible for this. Again, there's been a lot of blowback to him for saying that, for trying to tamper expectations and say, don't look immediately to Israel. Okay, so that's sort of curious. And then next, he was just on the Patrick Bet-David show. This is a massive influencer with 7, I think, million followers. Taylor Marshall's conveniently been on that program too, elevating his own public profile. So Nick is growing in status too. So it's something to keep an eye on, I think, going forward, and to ask the right questions, and to continue to be vigilant, and to continue to say, look, what is the fallout from this? Who's capitalizing? Who's gaining popularity? And why? And that's, I think, where we need to go with this in the future. I don't buy the story at all. I don't buy what the FBI is telling us. I think there's more going on, and that we'll see how this affects the under 35 crowd, which again is the future. And we'll see who's being elevated and who and what those people are starting to believe, and if they will shift going forward in their views on Israel. So that's all for today, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to this special report for Cox News. God bless and take care.